I've noticed that Deku's recently become the punching bag of the shonen community, and I don't like it primarily because I find most of the reasons people have for not liking him as a character to be poorly thought out or greatly misrepresenting him as well as the show he's a part of. I heavily disagree with these two videos I've recently come across and will be responding to today, but I don't condone harassment, not that I think anybody would or cares enough about my channel to even consider doing something like that over this video. It's also important to note that these two videos are a year to 2 years old, so it's entirely possible that these two no longer agree with what they've said or how they've said it. Nevertheless, I still think it's valuable to respond to these videos and point out the many flaws with their arguments.
The problem with Midoriya is that he's a basic bitch. This guy is the Patagonia or pumpkin spice latte of anime MCs. It's like Horikoshi was playing Build-A-Bear with anime MCs and was like, strangely colored hair? Check. Kindness and determination? Check. Chosen one trope? Check. And he decided that that was enough. Forget character development. Forget learning about the world around you or reflecting on society in any meaningful way. Deku's biggest realization in the show is that he has legs, that he can kick things instead of just punching them.
This bit of him listing off all the tropes combined into Deku's character really rubs me the wrong way because you can essentially do this with any fucking character. Oh look, there's Gon, he has strangely colored hair. Oh look, there's Luffy, he's got kindness and determination. Oh look, there's Naruto, he's got the chosen one trope down. It's funny because Deku isn't even an example of the chosen one trope. He got to the place he's in now out of happenstance. It was pure coincidence that he was fortunate enough to meet All Might in the way he did, and the reason why he inherited All Might's power isn't because of destiny or some prophecy, but because of All Might seeing a bit of himself in the kid and deeply being inspired by him. And Deku not having any character development is just wrong. He does change over the course of the story. He starts off as a timid, meek kid who noticeably grows into a more confident person. At the start, he's too afraid to even speak up against any of Bakugo's bullying, but during their first fight, he learns to finally stand up for himself. He begins to express himself more and grows into a leader for Class 1A, inspiring many people to change how they view their situations after learning how to do the same with his own. Now, it may sound basic and simple, and while you might have some problems with how that development in his character is handled, to imply that he doesn't get any character development at all is still incorrect. Also, this part where he makes fun of Deku learning shoot style is very reductive, because yes, on a surface level he does learn that he can kick instead of punch, but the reason why he was so fixated on punching was because he was stuck trying to emulate All Might as much as possible. So this scene is the literal definition of character development when he learns to break away from the formula he was so fixated on sticking to.
So there's a common idea among writers that characters are interesting when there's some sort of paradox about them. Something that can be encapsulated by the phrase, they're X but also Y. Why do we like Bakugo? Because he wants to be a hero, but his personality is more like a villain's. Why is Todoroki so interesting? Because he's a father who's the number 2 hero, but who he hates with all his heart. The same applies for other popular anime protagonists. We like Lelouch from Code Geass because he's both ruthless to his enemies and incredibly kind-hearted towards his sister. We like L because he's a genius detective, but also a freaking weirdo. At the start of the series, Deku has this too. He's a wannabe hero who has no shot at his dream because he's quirkless. But his lack of a quirk doesn't matter to him. He keeps his little notebook on superheroes anyway, rushes in to save Bakugo anyway, and wants to apply to UA anyway. I was convinced after this that Deku was going to become anime Batman, someone who uses his intelligence and knowledge of quirks and superhuman society to fight crime despite having no powers of his own, and I was so hyped. But instead, All Might fell from heaven and gave him a quirk, and with that, we lost what was interesting about Deku's character. Now, it's not about a boy without a quirk trying to do the impossible. Instead, it's about a kid trying to control his power. Not terrible, but not something unique at all.
Okay, so my first issue with this argument is that Deku does have a paradox to his character, even after he gains a quirk. It's the fact that he's timid and meek, but also has the heart of a hero. Him being quirkless contributes to his timid personality, but just gaining a quirk doesn't take that element away from his character, and that's part of what makes it interesting to watch him grow. Deku becoming anime Batman sounds fucking awesome, don't get me wrong, but it's not essential to his character working as demonstrated by this paradoxical writing concept. My second issue with this is that if we're allowing Todoroki's relationship with Endeavor to count as a paradox for his character, then why not include Deku's relationship with Bakugo? The fact that he idolizes him as a beacon of victory and tries to emulate him as much as possible in tense situations despite recognizing the fact that Bakugo treats him like absolute shit is an interesting paradox, isn't it? I mean, it just seems a little unfair to do this with Todoroki and not grant Deku the same benefits.
Brandon Sanderson, one of the greatest fantasy authors ever, thinks that there are 3 sliding scales of character. These are proactivity, or how intentional the character is about their goals, likability, and competence. He said that if you want an interesting character arc, have the character move up or down on one or more of these sliding scales. So, for example, a character like Endeavor, who starts out very high on competence and proactivity in reaching his goals, but low on likability, could move up on likability by trying to make amends for his previous shortcomings. A character like All Might, who's high in all 3, might have a character arc where he decreases in competence, following his power down. Deku is already plenty likable, and his competence as soon as he masters full cowling is pretty apparent. He can definitely get even stronger, but now that he's one of the most promising young heroes, it's not quite as interesting to watch him grow.
I agree, Deku does become very competent after mastering Full Cow, but even if I agreed that it's not as interesting to see him grow after that point, that's certainly not the only character arc he has. Let's take a look at the sliding scale of proactivity, for example. After he learns how to control his power better, he starts carving his own path, no longer trying to emulate All Might, instead doing his own thing. This is spurred on by All Might's decline in power, pressuring Deku to speed up his growth and become a worthy successor to the symbol of peace. In Season 4, he seeks out opportunities for hero work studies way ahead of schedule so that he can live up to the role of being All Might's successor. Even when Night Eye rejects him completely, he's dead set on convincing him and doing whatever it takes to reach his goals. When it comes to his innate sense of heroism, he puts his life and career on the line several times for characters that he should have no logical reason to, and in the later seasons, he even takes an interest in reforming or saving the villains of the show. Point is, after he goes up in terms of competence, he begins going up in terms of proactivity, so by this sliding scale logic, I guess that means Deku is a good character after all. And let's say that Deku maxed out in competence after mastering Full Cow, which is just objectively not true, but let's just say he did. By that logic, I guess Endeavor, who is a character this video cites as a good use of these sliding scales, stops being a good character after he defeats the high-end Nomu at the end of Season 4, which is not true. I mean, just imagine rephrasing what he said about Deku to fit for Endeavor. After Endeavor defeats the high-end Nomu, it's not quite as interesting to see him become more likable.
Deku's only real goal ever is wanting to save people and become a hero that smiles. Yeah, that's cool, and we want to see him achieve that goal. But it's also very one-note. We don't get a real reason for Deku wanting to pursue this, except for that he thinks All Might is very cool. This kind of goal isn't anything new or special. After Naruto, we saw an influx of anime where the main character wanted to achieve something amazing. Asta wants to be Wizard King, Takemichi wants to be the #1 delinquent, Hinata wants to be a great volleyball player. But each of those is tied to something fundamentally human. Asta wants to be Wizard King so he can eradicate classism. Takemichi wants to be the #1 delinquent so he can save his girlfriend. Hinata wants to be a great volleyball player so he can beat Kageyama. And of course, Naruto wants to be Hokage so the village will recognize him and he won't be alone anymore. Deku, unfortunately, just has none of that. There's no reason, no human reason, he wants to become a hero, beyond just being a good guy.
So this is one of the most common complaints with Deku's character. He's one-dimensional, he's just a generic MC who wants to save people and is kind, and yeah, he is all of those things, but a lot of people, including this person, just kind of hand-waves everything that makes his character work. Mainly the fact that all of those traits do come from a very human and understandable place. The society of My Hero Academia encourages people from a very early age to be someone like All Might, and they even implicitly determine someone's worth or potential by the quirk that they're born with. This is shown to us by these two dipshits who were responsible for giving Bakugo an inflated ego, All Might's subtle remarks about the police being clowned on because the heroes are the ones doing all the actual work, and how Deku was quite literally shunned and bullied for being quirkless. So it's very easy to see how a young impressionable boy who's been indoctrinated into this mindset of being a hero equals good would want with all of his heart to become one. Does Deku have a legitimate desire to save people? Yes, but it's a desire cultivated by his environment, what he's been shown and encouraged to idolize, and it's certainly not for the one-dimensional reason that so many people say it is. The way he takes all of that and turns it into he just thinks All Might is cool is so absurdly reductive, but even if that wasn't the case, even if Deku's sole motivation for wanting to become a hero is that he thinks All Might is cool, that is still a very human and understandable reason for wanting to do something. In the world of My Hero Academia, heroes are not something out of the ordinary. It is the job to pursue. If there's any parallel to the real world that I can make, it would be the equivalent of YouTubers, but imagine a society based around becoming one. I know a big part of why I started posting shit and probably why this guy started doing it is because I watched a bunch of YouTubers as a kid and thought that what they were doing was really cool. This is what separates Deku from other generic nice guy protagonists like Tanjiro, whose backstory and origin directly contradicts the way he acts. His kindness towards demons comes from the fact that his sister is a demon, and because of his knowledge of her circumstances, he can't help but be sympathetic towards other demons who may be in a similar situation. Now this on its own is a fine reason for the main character to be a kind, sympathetic person, but combined with the fact that he consistently runs into the most reprehensible demons imaginable who derive pleasure from killing and torturing others, and you just gotta call bullshit after a certain point. I mean, I get it, not all demons can control their urges, but there's a difference between demons who kill people out of necessity and ones that kill because they find it fun. His inability to differentiate between the two is wholly unbelievable, especially when you consider the fact that Tanjiro doesn't even bother to learn why the demons he's fighting even became demons in the first place, which makes his acts of kindness feel even more forced. The moment that just completely destroyed Tanjiro as a character for me and broke any illusion that I was watching a real person struggle was in his fight against this demon who used to write poems or some shit. While the audience's is shown as flashback, there's nothing indicating that Tanjiro was also made aware of this demon's backstory, so why in the flying fuck would he feel compelled to make sure that he doesn't trample all over his writing as it gets scattered across the room? He doesn't know about how valuable and dear to the demon's heart these random pieces of paper are, so are we just meant to assume that Tanjiro has fucking biblical levels of kindness and takes care not to trample on anything that could potentially be significant to anyone in some way? Not to mention this was done in the heat of battle during a life-threatening situation. There's no reason for Tanjiro to act this way in the slightest. Deku has never had a moment like this. He doesn't act with absurd superhuman levels of kindness. Some people might vaguely remember a similar scene from season 4 of Deku purposely avoiding the posters in Night Eye's office while bouncing around the room, but the difference is that both Deku and Night Eye have been established to be super obsessive fanboys over All Might, so Deku has a reason to avoid ruining another fan's valuable merchandise. Also, this was done during this world's equivalent of a job interview, and not during a serious heated battle where his life is at stake. And oh yeah, the point of the scene is not that Deku is kind for doing this, it's that what he did was super over the top and excessive, causing Night Eye to laugh and accept him for an internship. The only moment I can see people making this argument for is when Deku has an inner monologue about wanting to save Shigaraki. Like Tanjiro, Deku doesn't know about Shigaraki's backstory, but he has seen Shigaraki suffering at the hands of his adoptive father, and his desire to save Shigaraki comes from his inability to stand idly by as people are taken advantage of or let down by the system, which has been shown to be a part of his character time and time again. Also, let's not gloss over the fact that he had Hinata from Haikyuu listed here as an example of a protagonist that has a human element to his motivations, even though you can also boil his reasons for wanting to be a volleyball player down to he just thinks the little giant is really cool. If anything, Hinata had less reason to get into volleyball than Deku had to become a hero because he didn't literally live in a society based on that sport. Now, in the video, he says that Hinata's motivation is to beat Kageyama, which, no, that is not his motivation. He definitely has a rivalry with Kageyama, but that's not the reason he loves volleyball with all of his heart. But even if it was, then again, why do you completely ignore Deku's rivalry with Bakugo? The drama between them is very human, and leaving that out when talking about Deku seems a little disingenuous to me.
There are ways to do character arcs that don't revolve around becoming more powerful. In My Hero, we have Eri breaking out of her shell, we have Ida becoming a better hero, we have Endeavor treating his family better. But Deku doesn't really have problems. From the beginning, he's a nice, likable, heroic kid, which means he doesn't have much room to grow, except in his power level.
Like I said before, Deku had many problems at the beginning of the show. He was plagued with self-doubt and self-esteem issues, and he was very self-destructive when it came to his desire to save people. All of that comes from how this hero society treats people who can't become heroes, but you could say that he gets over that pretty quickly, like by season 3 at most. But then All Might loses his power, and the pressure is on for him to become the next symbol of peace, to live up to All Might's legacy. Even after that, though, Deku becomes overcome by the burden of One for All, and having the pressure of the fate of the world on his shoulders causes him to distance himself from people who want to help him. He also wants to save Shigaraki. The fact that he wants to save him, in contrast to how he's seen by the rest of society and how much of a threat he genuinely is, creates tension and an interesting source of conflict for the story. So yes, even after the beginning of the story, Deku does have problems and obstacles to work on aside from his power level, which makes his character interesting long after the first 2 episodes where he's quirkless.
And even when it comes to power, there's a serious problem. The power that Deku gets isn't a normal superpower that could be good with training, like Lemillion's. It's the quirk of the #1 hero. There's absolutely zero mystery regarding how he's going to get his top spot, because someone in his shoes already did. And in Deku's case, someone with less latent potential did, because we know that One for All gets stronger with each successive user. Everything we see All Might do is something that we know Deku will be able to do one day, and that kind of sucks the fun and mystery out of it. And that's only compounded when Deku unlocks quirks within All for One that All Might never had.
This is one of the more understandable complaints people have with Deku, but it's definitely overblown. For one, while All Might has achieved what Deku wants, the situation in the story can always change, as it did in Season 6, collapsing Hero Society into a state worse than how it was when All Might was at its prime. And besides, that isn't the only source of drama that comes out of the show. Like, if My Hero Academia was solely meant to be an underdog story, then this criticism would be much more appropriate, but My Hero Academia isn't about that entirely. Deku's character isn't even about that entirely. Following All Might's decline in Season 3, the show seems much more interested in exploring the darker undercurrents of this hero society, which was something that was always present in the early act of the show. And Deku's role in exploring these scenarios isn't to be an underdog, but to inspire change in others who are going down the wrong path or helping the society to correct course.
Then there's also the problem of messaging and theme. My Hero Academia in the first few episodes seems to be saying something along the lines of anyone can be a hero. But this isn't true, because not everyone is going to get powers from anime Superman. Even if Deku did get powers from All Might, this could have been remedied by having him also be insightful when he fights, or use gadgets in an interesting way. Maybe at the beginning of the series, he could be trying for the hero support course instead of the main hero course.
Wrong. The theme of the show is not that anybody can be a hero. If anything, it's the exact opposite. These first 2 episodes are not saying that Deku can become a hero because anybody can be one. They are saying that Deku should become a hero because he has the specific mentality and acts in a way that is fitting of the role of hero. The reason why All Might picks Deku to inherit his quirk is because he is the embodiment of what heroes these days are missing. Before All Might learned that Deku had the true heart of a hero, he told him straight up that his dream of becoming one was unrealistic and that without a quirk his only choice would be to give up. So in this society, you need 2 things to become a hero. 1, a quirk so you can realistically do battle with villains, and 2, the heart and willingness to put everything on the line in order to save others. Deku only possesses one of these traits at the beginning of the show, and because All Might sees that, he gives Deku the other necessary trait so that he can accomplish his dream. If All Might couldn't do this, he'd probably just go, well, that was brave, kid, but still stupid as fuck, and you should probably still not put yourself in unnecessary danger from now on. These first 2 episodes are a little commentary on the unfortunate fact that the one person who has the honesty, virtue, and will to be a hero cannot be one because of his lack of a quirk. This is something that nearly everybody who criticizes Deku and My Hero Academia as a whole completely miss. Also, Deku does fight in an insightful way. During almost every battle he's a part of, he plays the role of tactician, picking apart his enemies' fighting styles and always taking notes whenever he gets the chance to.
Deku isn't realistic at all about his goals and gets extremely lucky that he was in the right place at the right time. Because he's so unrealistic, he doesn't actually engage with the flaws of hero society in any meaningful way. MHA says in the beginning that a whole 1/5 of the population is quirkless. Why don't we talk about those people at all? Deku definitely should have cared about their plight.
Another statement that is just factually wrong. Deku does engage in the many flaws with hero society. In season 2, he fights Todoroki, whose entire character is based around the shitty things people do in order to make children with powerful quirks. He stands up to Endeavor and helps Todoroki realize that he's only hurting himself by tying so much of his identity to his father. When he goes to save Ida from Hero Killer Stain, he manages to snap Ida out of his one-dimensional thoughts for revenge and remember what it really means to be a hero. There's a whole arc in season 5 where Deku spends time with the Todoroki family and watches them try to work out their issues. In season 4, he meets another unfortunate child who was taken advantage of because of her powerful quirk and does something to try and help her break out of her shell, which is something you mentioned in your own video. He meets people who were less fortunate than he was, like Shinso and Gentle Criminal, who while not quirkless are still representative of the type of people you want him to engage with. They're people whose quirks are not suited to becoming a hero, and they face discrimination and broken dreams because of it. A big part of Deku's fights with both of these characters was how painful it was for him to deal with them because their plights hit way too close to home for him as someone who had a similar problem at the beginning of the show. Even in the scenario where Miria loses his quirk entirely, Deku offers to give him one for all. Is this not him caring about the plight of those less fortunate than himself? And the Gentle Criminal fight specifically sparks Deku's desire to understand what makes these villains act in the way that they do, and we see this being reflected in how Deku wants to save Shigaraki after seeing that scared kid suffering at the hands of All for One, or how he even tries to reason with absolute monsters like Muscular during their second fight. During his fight with Lady Nagant, he has to come to terms with the shadier elements of hero society and learns that the world isn't just black and white. He suffers from how flimsy the people's faith in heroes is and feels every bit of pressure that All Might did trying to be the next symbol of peace. Now, like I said in the intro, this person made this video 2 years ago, so maybe that was before season 6 came out, but he said he also read the manga, so he should have taken some of these things into account. The rest of this video is just him talking about how he would fix Deku as a character, but I'm not going to show it. It's just the same things he's been talking about the entire video, and I've already responded to everything he had to say about this topic. If there's anything I can say about this video, it's that the person making it didn't seem like he was being fake about his opinion. It did feel as though he genuinely felt this way, but maybe just didn't know how to express it and looked up writing concepts online to try and justify his feelings on the matter. But it's so obvious when people say shit like this just because it's popular to do so. Check this shit out. One look at the title tells you everything you need to know. Why Deku fails as a protagonist. And Gohan's underrated. What do these two topics have to do with each other at all? I mean, I get it if the title was something like Why Gohan Succeeds While Deku Doesn't, or Gohan is What Deku Should Have Been, but this just feels so tacked on. I can't help but feel as though this video was only titled this way because he wanted to make a video on Gohan and just threw in Deku as a way of getting people to click. But hey, I might be reading into things, and even if I'm completely right, a good argument is a good argument regardless of why it was made. So let's take a look and see why this guy doesn't like Deku.
Let's start with the big one. Despite being the underdog, the man who society spat on, Deku is quite literally given one of the most powerful quirks in the known universe. Bruh moment.
Oh great, it's the same argument I just talked about at this timestamp here. Next.
Let's now go back to Deku's mini origin story. His spider bite, his death of Uncle Ben. Deku is characterized as being innately heroic because despite him being quirkless and effectively powerless, Deku still rushes to save Bakugo, his boy crush slash lifelong bully. Wow, what a hero. My biggest issue with this scene is that Deku does not display heroism, he displays recklessness. There are literally multiple pro-heroes at the scene, seemingly with everything under control, but even still, Deku rushes in to save Bakugo. Not only does Deku not save Bakugo, he properly gets in the way and nearly gets himself killed. Deku objectively just makes everything worse. He charges in thoughtlessly and recklessly, not heroically.
Yes, the argument popularized by Nuxtaku's video on Deku being a bad protagonist, except even worse here. For one, this guy completely misrepresents the scene in a way that's so obvious I don't even know why he kept this in while editing. This situation was definitely not under control, and every shot that you showed when you said this was the aftermath. All you have to do is open your eyes and see the fire raging everywhere and read the subtitles of the heroes saying that they don't have this situation under control. If everything was all peaches and gravy, Deku wouldn't have felt this immense guilt over what was happening. He would have been fine to just chill on the sidelines and be depressed over his dreams being crushed, but that wasn't the case because Bakugo was in legitimate danger and was about to die. Also, Deku did contribute to Bakugo's rescue here. It's because of him that All Might was inspired to act, and All Might is the only reason why the sludge villain was defeated. If Deku had not acted, All Might wouldn't have either, and Bakugo would be dead. Even if you take that out of the picture, Deku throwing his bag temporarily makes the villain release his hold on Bakugo, giving him extra breathing time. No matter how you look at the scene, you cannot walk away with the interpretation that Deku made the situation objectively worse. You'd have to be severely inattentive to accidentally interpret the scene in that way. But even if you ignore all of that blatant misinformation in this part of the video, the argument is still bad. The problem with saying that what Deku did here isn't an act of heroism and is instead just suicidal or reckless is that you have to do a hell of a lot of mental gymnastics to make this logic even seem like it resembles something that makes some modicum of sense. Because by definition, trying to help someone regardless of what happens to yourself is heroism. Yes, it is reckless, but that doesn't mean it isn't brave or heroic. This guy brings up Moomin Rider as a good example of heroism, and he does his best to try and make Moomin Rider's situation sound different.
On the surface, Moomin's deep-sea sacrifice and Deku's origin story seem quite similar. The difference between them, though, is that while both are powerless, Moomin Rider is self-aware. He has an entire bike ride to contemplate how badly the odds are stacked against him. With his legs aching and rain pouring down his visor, Moomin Rider must have replayed his ass getting clapped by a seafood platter on testosterone in his mind countless times, and even then he steeled his resolve. Moomin Rider knows he is weak and worthless. He knows he's not a Class B hero, but still, he has to fight because no one else can, because he's a hero. He doesn't have delusions of grandeur, of being the next All Might, but instead thrusts himself into battle, not because his legs thrust him forward unknowingly, but because doing so has a slim, but still slightly existent chance of being beneficial. Moomin Rider is a hero. Deku is a fool.
But at the end of the day, you can apply the same logic to him. Moomin Rider knew that he stood no chance against this villain, but he still went in to fight anyway. By your own logic, that is reckless and foolish. You say that he had a whole bike ride to contemplate how much the odds were stacked against him, but doesn't that make him even more foolish for deciding to go through with it anyway? That's not heroism, that's just stupid. Why doesn't he just leave? The problem is that these two scenes are the same. They are both incredibly heroic because these are characters who are powerless, but still rise to the occasion to try and do the right thing anyway. Unless you're saying that Moomin Rider helped out in a way that Deku didn't, which is not true because again, Deku did make the situation objectively better. Also, Deku didn't act in the scene out of some delusions of becoming the next All Might. At this point in the episode, he had already given up on the idea of becoming a hero. The reason Deku ran in to try and help Bakugo was simply because he wanted to help Bakugo. He takes this argument that Deku is not heroic and just reckless, which is built on a very shaky foundation at the very least, and absolutely runs with it for the next 2 minutes, bringing up the scene where he goes 1,000,000% and puts his arms at great risk. And seriously, just listen to how bad this is.
Deku's recklessness is even acknowledged by the narrative itself. After exploding his arms with reckless abandon, the doctor tells Deku to cut that shit out because he might turn himself into Captain Noodle Arm. 2 seconds later, Izuku goes one for all 1,000,000% and comes out all Gucci.
The scene where the doctor tells Deku to stop recklessly using his arms happens after his fight with Muscular. If you don't believe me, here's Deku literally flashing back to that fight in the middle of this conversation with his doctor. His punishment in this fight against Muscular is the fact that his arms got this damaged and he can't keep breaking them anymore. So he switches to his legs and comes up with shoot style, and then in season 6 his arms are no longer a problem because his body has grown stronger and has become more conditioned to one for all. But he was still punished for going overboard in this scene in a way that forced him to change his fighting style. He also makes it sound like Deku was just doing this for no reason when he did it to save Koto's life. Leaving this out obviously makes Deku seem stupid as shit and just reckless for no reason, which is not the case. Again, just blatant misinformation to make Deku seem way way worse than he is, and for a point that doesn't even work to begin with. It's pretty funny that this argument only seems to make sense when you leave out crucial pieces of context, and he does this again when he brings up 2 other examples of when Deku should have been punished for doing something stupid.
Deku gets reprimanded for illegally and recklessly going after Stain. 2 seconds later, Deku wants to break the rules to save Bakugo. Tenya even tries to literally slap some sense into Deku. Still, Deku gives no shits for the rules and does his own thing anyway. Does Deku ever face consequences? Nah, because it's Deku and he's a hero. His impulsive actions are always painted as just and righteous, cause plot armor, I guess.
He went after Stain to save his friend's life. Ida was about to be murdered, but no, he broke the law, so what he did was shit, I guess. Even though Ida broke the law first and Deku only did the same in order to protect him. Bakugo's life was also in danger. He was kidnapped by a murderous, psychotic group of villains. Also, he wasn't even initially planning on helping out Bakugo. It was because Kirishima encouraged him that he decided to go through with this, and after Ida slaps the shit out of him, the show reveals that they were actually planning on rescuing Bakugo without fighting and putting anybody in danger. It's because of this that he's able to come up with a way of safely getting Bakugo out of the situation. Again, he made the situation better, which is something you praised Moomin Rider for doing before. Let's put things into perspective here. If in the world of One Punch Man it was illegal for low-ranked heroes like Moomin Rider to go into battle with villains, that wouldn't make Moomin Rider's actions any less heroic.
The show goes way too hard on the nice guy stuff. The crying is beyond extra, and Deku's supposed forgiving sweetness is just doormat behavior. I know it's a bit of a meme, but it's true. Bakugo is literally his lifetime bully and extremely verbally abusive. But oh no, Mahatma Deku is just so forgiving and kind. Wrong. Deku displays toxic weakness, not kindness. Kindness, born from fragility, isn't truly a sign of being a decent bloke. Deku is displayed as so overly kind that his niceness becomes jarring, annoying, and a tad pathetic. The weight of his tears also lose meaning when he cries at literally everything.
His crying doesn't contribute to a nice guy persona, it contributes to his timid demeanor. Also, Deku doesn't just cry at literally anything. Most of the scenes of him crying are in response to intense physical and emotional pain. Dude doesn't just break his arms, he turns them into full-on noodles. Here he is getting crushed by a psychopathic murderer the size of a bulldozer. But no, he's crying. That's way too much. What a pussy. Here he is being suffocated to death. But no, he's crying. Oh man, his dreams and aspirations of becoming a hero in a society that determines your worth based on how well you can become a hero were just crushed, and he was told that he's essentially worthless in the context of everything this world teaches people to value? Why is he crying? That's so extra. I know I've spent a bunch of time responding to this crying point already, but if you have a problem with him crying, I and several others have already made a video on why we think that's a pretty bad reason to not like a character, so let's move on to the next thing he said. What he said about Deku being Mahatma Gandhi towards Bakugo is not true. He looks up to him because he sees Bakugo as an overwhelming symbol of victory, but he still acknowledges how shitty he can be and even lashes out at him multiple times. In their first fight, Deku basically tells him to fuck off and shows that he won't just sit around defenselessly and be bullied by him anymore. He even turns the name Deku, a name that Bakugo used to make fun of him, into one with a more inspirational meaning. At the end of their fight, he calls Bakugo an idiot for not realizing that he truly admired him, even though he was being a giant asshole. When the two of them are forced to work together in their fight against All Might, he shouts at Bakugo and admonishes him for always being so quick to lose his temper, citing that as the reason why he can't hold a conversation with him anymore. And during their second fight, even though Bakugo is dumping all of his personal feelings onto Deku, Deku straight up says that he's not nice enough to be his punching bag, and that if he's going to go through with this, he's going to try and win and use this as an opportunity to test out his shoot style. This is reflected in how he talks trash throughout the fight and gets into it so much to the point where he lets out 8% of his power instead of the usual 5 at this point in the story. Deku has certainly looked past Bakugo's actions, and their relationship is one of mutual respect now as opposed to the one-sided nature of things at the beginning of the series, but the show never portrays what Bakugo did to be good, and Deku never outright forgives him either. The only time it could be argued that Deku did indeed forgive him was in season 6 when Bakugo apologized, and at that point in the show it would feel justified.
Deku is also treated as a god by almost everyone in the series. Not only does he never face consequences, literally everyone seems to throb over him. Women quiver at his green afro, and his class picks him as class president, just because he's Deku, I guess. Even Stain, a literal villain, is so intoxicated by Izuku's beta sissy pheromones that he non-stop froths at how heroic Deku is. All this just further confuses his underdog status.
2 girls have a crush on him, and 1 serial killer views him as the embodiment of a true hero. That's what he means when he says everybody treats him like a god. I mean, I guess by that logic, every main character involved in a love triangle is seen as a god in their show, and every main character that a villain develops a fascination with is seen as a god in their show. And Deku becoming the class rep was decided as a vote, not just because he's Deku. When elected, Deku got 3 votes, 1 from Uraraka, 1 from Ida, and the third one probably from himself. He got the position because his 2 closest friends voted for him, and it wasn't just plot convenience. It was actually the opposite of plot convenience, because his position as class rep was temporary and was handed off to Ida by the end of the episode, something you do not mention. Also, this scene was comedic and not an accurate representation of how everybody else in the class viewed him. Again, more blatant misinformation misinformation in order to make Deku seem worse, specifically in a Gary Stu-like way this time. 7 minutes and 41 seconds to 10 minutes and 36 seconds is the last segment of the video before he starts praising Gohan. He talks about Deku's lack of a backstory and motivation for wanting to be a hero, and it's all shit that I've covered at this timestamp here. And he also talks about how Deku doesn't give two shits about quirkless people, which I've already covered at this timestamp here. I'm not kidding, you can go watch the video yourself and see just how thoroughly I was able to respond to the points he made in this part of the video, just by responding to another video that parroted the same talking points, but of course, don't harass him. There's no point in repeating myself, but this video is pretty bad, getting things wrong constantly and spreading misinformation in order to make his point seem stronger. Even the first video I covered had this problem. While I have faith that the people who made these two videos didn't do it intentionally, misinformation was still spread all the same. And the worst part of it all is that almost nobody in the comment sections of these videos is even bothering to correct any of it, and that's because they don't care about the arguments being made, they just care about the conclusion. As long as they know that Deku is seen as a flawed character, they're perfectly fine with people misrepresenting him to make a point. That, or they just want to justify their own feelings on why they hate the guy. I mean, seriously, just read some of these comments and take note of how easily debunked they are. My biggest issue with Deku is that despite wanting to desperately be a hero, he did nothing to make that happen before the story. No training, no conditioning, no martial arts training, nothing. It makes it seem like despite showing that he was willing to put his life on the line for it, he just didn't give a shit. Another talking point parroted from the Nux Taku video made a while back. The reason why Deku didn't do anything to train his body is because deep down he had given up on being a hero. He was in denial over it and wanted to cling to hope, which is why he still kept a notebook and a hopeful attitude, but it was all just lip service, and this is shown to us in this clip here.
プロのトップまで言うんだ。泣くな。分かってたろ。現実さ。分かってたから必死こいてたんじゃないか。見ないように、見ないようにって。
Deku is someone I really used to like, but my main problem is that he conforms to a society that would normally expel him. Horikoshi is someone who can build up a massively flawed hero world, but he didn't flesh out these plot points. Even though Deku has stated that all men aren't born equal, he follows regulations that don't help everyone. His desire to become the #1 hero is a responsibility that Deku would still need to comprehend. Ever since Deku received a quirk, that made him lose his uniqueness. Deku also doesn't seem to be open to reforming his villains. The spin-off manga Vigilantes is actually what Deku's story should have been. Deku conforms to hero society. No, actually, he doesn't. The entire point of his vigilante arc was recognizing the deep-seated flaws and shady things going on in the background. Even without taking Season 6 into account, Deku breaks many regulations in pursuit of what he thinks is right. One example of which I have talked about in this very video. Another I have talked about in this very video. When has he ever followed a regulation that he doesn't agree with? And he doesn't want to reform his villains. Gentle Criminal, Muscular, Lady Nagant, Overhaul, Shigaraki. He tries to reform a bunch of his villains, and even if they aren't villains, he does correct the one-dimensional or selfish thinking of many people. Todoroki, Endeavor, Bakugo, Ida. I could go on, but this video is long enough, so I'll just end it with this. Even if you hate a character with all of your being, you should still call out misinformation when you see it, because if you don't, you're just encouraging others to say whatever the hell they want about something to justify their feelings on the matter, and that is dog shit.